Hello and welcome to episode 15 of the Wisdom from the Akasha podcast. My name is Susie. I am an Akashic Records teacher and practitioner. And today I really want to talk about your internal navigation system, so your intuition, and the Clair senses. Before we get into the individual Clair senses, there's a couple of points I want to note about intuition and this internal guidance system. Intuition is a huge topic. I'll probably do lots of episodes in respect of intuition, but for now, what I want you to remember is that intuition itself is part of the internal divine feminine energy. So the qualities that you associate with the internal divine feminine energy apply to the intuition. What do I mean by that? Internal divine feminine energy is cyclical. Intuition also is cyclical, which means sometimes you're going to feel that your intuition is really strong, that you're picking up everything, and other times you're going to feel that you're maybe not as intuitive. This is completely normal, okay? But by working with your internal divine feminine energy and strengthening it, you're going to strengthen that intuition. The Clair senses, on the other hand, provide the structure, so they provide a more masculine energy to interpret the information that is being received by the intuition. And the Clair senses are what we're going to really focus on today. I also want to note every single one of you has intuition, every single one of you has an internal navigation system, and every single one of you has the ability to be able to connect to all of the Clair senses. I see people out there on social media all of the time saying, I'm a born psychic. Nobody can develop these abilities. This is just not true. What happens is you go through many, many incarnations where you will develop certain abilities, and this shows up in this incarnation as being drawn to specific paths, specific practices, and also having this natural ability to tune into a specific Clair sense. This doesn't come from nowhere. This is from many lifetimes of development. And we see this in the Akashic Records all of the time. But every single person has these abilities. And the more that you expand, the more you spiritually develop, the more you do your healing work, the more you expand that light grid that I talk about in the Akashic Records, the more access you're going to have to the various Clair senses, and the more connected you're going to feel to your intuition. You also know that I love to bring everything back to the chakra system as a way to understand things, and each of the Clair senses has a specific chakra that it works with and that it works through. So I will cover that today as well. Always remember, when we're talking about the chakra system, it is a system. For example, clairsentience is very connected to the solar plexus chakra, but if your root chakra is imbalanced, it's very important to deal with the root chakra imbalance before focusing your attention and energy on the solar plexus chakra. We always have to work up through the chakra system and balance from the root chakra all the way up to the crown chakra. Obviously, here I'm talking about the 7 primary chakras. Whilst there are 112, 114, depending upon which tradition you look at, we refer specifically to these 7 primary chakras being the main chakras that you have access to. There are additional chakras, there are transpersonal chakras, and maybe I'll do some episodes on those. But for now, today, we're just going to be talking about those 7 primary chakras. We want to remember that the chakras are a system. Some of you may have experienced this where you're really focusing all your energy and attention on trying to open your third eye, trying to strengthen that clairvoyance ability. But if you haven't got the root chakra balanced, if you haven't got your sacral chakra balanced, it doesn't matter how much energy and attention you put on the development of the third eye chakra, you're not going to see the results that are there unless you work with the chakra system as a whole system. For those of you in the membership on Sunday this week, we are going to be talking all about the solar plexus and all about clairsentience. We're going to do a really deep dive into that before we start our journey into the astral plane starting in June. I will, of course, put a link in the show notes for anyone who wants to join the membership. All of the previous members only lives and previously held workshops are in the members area for you to watch in your own time. So if you're listening to this later than May 2024 and you think, oh, I would have loved to see that episode, don't panic. Everything is in there for you to watch in your own time. So intuition is very feminine energy dominant, and we utilize the clair senses as a structure to interpret the information from that intuition energy. The clair senses you may have heard referred to as solar or lunar clairs. This is the dominant energy of the individual clair. Clairsentience and claircognizance, which I will go into specifically, are lunar clairs. They're internal, they're very connected again to the divine feminine energy, the internal divine feminine energy. And clairvoyance and clairaudience, which are the more obvious, the more well-known clairs, are what we refer to as solar clairs. They're more connected to the internal masculine energy. Let's look at each one and, of course, the kind of signs and symptoms of this being your strongest clair. Most people will have one or two clairs that they feel is the strongest. Some of you will have access to all four of the clairs that I'm going to talk about today, but I want you just to feel into how this relates to you. First up, we will look at the two lunar clairs, so clairsentience and claircognizance. Clairsentience loosely translates into this clear feeling. Lots of you who currently consider yourself to be an empath are actually clairsentient. So, what's the difference between an empath and someone who is clairsentient? Clairsentience psychically feel. So they are picking up information from feelings. It's that gut feeling. It's that walking into a room and feeling the energy of the people who are in that room, maybe what's taken place. It's this ability to do that. The difference between someone who is empathic and someone who is clairsentient is the clairsentient is going to pick up these feelings and they're going to receive some information from it. So, for example, they may walk into a room where somebody has just had an argument and they feel this anger, this negative energy in the room, and they understand the kind of flavor of the energy. For someone who is just empathic and they haven't started to receive information, they will feel this energy, but they won't have any idea as to what the energy is or what has gone on. So that's the difference between someone who would just consider themselves to be an empath and someone who is clairsentient. Of course, ultimately, all people who are empaths are also clairsentient, and where their focus should be is developing that ability to feel, but to be able to pull information from the feeling that they are picking up on. Because the clair senses are very natural, especially the lunar clairs, they're very internal. People who have clairsentience will often think that what their experience is not a intuitive or a psychic gift, it's just normal life and that everybody feels this. That's not the case. Everybody has the ability to tune into and connect to their clairsentience, but for some people it is stronger than others. And clairsentience, out of the four clairs that I'm going to discuss today, is one that is very difficult to switch on and off. For clairsentience, they tend to be on all of the time. They tend to be interpreting energy all of the time. And it can be very overwhelming for them. So they do tend to need a lot of time by themselves in their own energy. They need to learn good protection and cleansing rituals while they're working through their journey, just to be able to really understand what is theirs and what they're picking up from other people. As I said earlier, clairsentience is very connected to a strong solar plexus chakra, and Ensuring that the solar plexus chakra is in balance, so it's not underactive and it's not overactive, can be really helpful and beneficial for someone who is clairsentient. Sign number one of this being your strongest Clair would be that you consider yourself to be an empath, that you have this ability to feel into energies and what's going on. Number two would be that you just cannot ignore your feelings. You have these big emotions, you have these fluctuations in when you're feeling good, everything's great, and when you're feeling down, it's very down, you're feeling very contracted. Other common signs with people who are clairsentient are they are very moved by stories, by movies, by books, and these emotions tend to be larger than life. Now, of course, because the clairsentient is picking up on different energies all of the time, they will be picking up on the energies of love and joy and the higher spiritual energies, but they will also be picking up on energies that would be considered more negative and more contracted states. So fear, anger, and this can be picking up on the energy of the entire collective, not just people who they are in a room with. Also, clairsentient people tend to find that their moods shift very rapidly, especially when they're around different people. If they have people in their lives who are particularly vampiric in respect of draining their energy, they find that it can really suck their energy out of them. It can take them a couple of days to restore themselves back to normal. If you are somebody who feels this is definitely me, I tick all of those boxes, my best advice to you is first of all to ensure that you are going to have some time alone. You're going to need that solitary time to really pay attention to what is going on inside of you. And whilst you're having that time alone, spend time being very self-observational. Self-observation is a very strong spiritual practice, and when you're able to take a step back and observe the thoughts that are arising and not attach to them, not think that they are you, if you're able to observe the emotions that are arising and again, not attached to them, but just pay attention to them, this can be really helpful for understanding what it is that you're experiencing and, of course, starting to interpret the information that is coming into you in these feelings. As I noted earlier, the solar plexus chakra is very connected to this. So, obviously, practices that are going to help balance the solar plexus chakra are important. But as always, if you're feeling my nervous system is very dysregulated, I don't feel grounded, I don't feel safe and secure, then please look at the root chakra before focusing your energy and attention on the solar plexus chakra. If you feel like there's some emotional work that needs to be done, or there's some shadow work that's requires your attention, then please look at the sacral chakra before focusing your attention on the solar plexus chakra. Ensuring the solar plexus chakra is in balance is very important for this particular Clair, but as I said earlier, we've got to start working with the chakra system as a system and utilizing it in that way rather than focusing time and attention on just a specific chakra and not looking at the system as a whole. I say this because so many people will reach out to me and they'll say, I have been trying to open my third eye. I've done all of these practices. I've spent all of this money. I've been doing all of this stuff and I haven't seen any results. And a lot of the time, when we look into it from the Akashic Records perspective, they actually need to go back to the beginning with, okay, how's the root chakra? How's the sacral chakra? And work their way up before moving into that. So, this is why I will continually say, look at the chakra system as a system, understand it, and then work with it in that way to really help you develop so that you're not getting frustrated with your practices and so that you're actually developing and seeing the results that you want to see. Claircognizance is the next of those internal clairs, and the chakra connected to claircognizance is the crown chakra. Claircognizance is roughly translated into clear knowing. For those of you who receive downloads, for those of you who just know the truth behind a situation, but you cannot explain why, you have no logical reason for having a belief about something, this is claircognizance. Again, because it is one of these internal lunar clairs, a lot of you will completely ignore this and not think that this is actually a psychic or intuitive ability. You'll just think that this is just something that everybody has, but this very much is the claircognizance at work, the knowing of things and really being able to feel into your discernment. The difference between clairsentience and claircognizance is the clairsentient has the feeling and then the information. The claircognizant just receives the information. There isn't a feeling attached to it. Common signs amongst people who have claircognizance as their dominant clair would be they experience lots of deja vu or premonitions. They can often receive information through their dream space, and they have this ability to receive those downloads. So when they are on their own, when they're spending time by themselves, and they're just allowing their mind to be open, their senses to be open, they will often receive this impouring of information. Of course, because they do have this ability to feel into truth behind situations, they really struggle with dishonesty and inauthenticity. And the claircognizant will often have inspiration and ideas just drop in out of the blue. For the claircognizant, their desire is to live in complete alignment to their soul. They want to communicate with their soul as much as possible. And when they are out of alignment, they really feel out of alignment. Lots of people who are drawn to work with the Akashic Records are claircognizant, and the desire to be able to zoom out, look more objectively at their lives, and make use of this ability for information just to drop in appeals to them. And of course, the Akashic Records offers that. And this desire to live in soul alignment, of course, is what you were doing with the Akashic Records. We're wanting to understand, okay, why am I not in alignment? How can I move forward? What perhaps is holding me back from living in true alignment? So, lots of you who are claircognizant will also be drawn to working with your Akashic records. To work with, strengthen, and develop this, Claire, it's absolutely essential to ensure that you're continually revisiting those lower chakras, making sure the nervous system is regulated, making sure that the emotional body is stable, and making sure that you're in balance in respect of your personal power. The reason for this is because you want to ensure that you have the strongest roots to support that crown chakra and the information coming into your form. You want to have time by yourself, you want to spend time just being in that neutral energy and allowing the information to drop in. Now, the crown chakra isn't one that holds a lot of energetic stagnation, but where we can have a problem connecting to the crown chakra is when we've experienced religious trauma, where we have a preconceived idea of God, and specifically an angry God who is judging, who is a punisher. If you are someone who has experienced a lot of religious trauma and you're also someone who is claircognizant, healing with and working through the religious trauma can be very helpful to strengthen and develop this ability. Now let's move over to the solar clairs, the clairvoyance and the clairaudience. These tend to be the clairs that people are really trying to develop. And what I want to really state here is that no clair sense is better than another. You're not more psychic or more intuitive if you're clairvoyant than somebody who is clairsentient. They are all equal in respect of the strength of being able to connect into that internal navigation system. I know there is this trend at the moment to really focus time and attention on clairvoyance and opening the third eye. But please remember that if you are someone who has the internal lunar clairs, you are just as psychic, and the information you receive is just as valid as somebody who is seeing or hearing. It can be helpful to think of the clair senses as the higher self version of the physical senses. So thinking of clairvoyance as the higher self's version of seeing, thinking of clairaudience as the higher self's version of hearing, and working with the sight and the hearing and the deprivation of sight and hearing, if you're trying to develop these solar clairs, can be very beneficial. Most of you will be familiar with the term clairvoyance, roughly translates into the clear seeing, and of course the chakra that you're working with clairvoyance is the third eye, the chakra, the ajna chakra. Signs that clairvoyance is your dominant clair would include that when you close your eyes, you're able to see things. Now, depending upon the level of development of your third eye chakra, will determine what it is that you're seeing. So, for some of you, it may just be different colors. For some, it may be geometric shapes. For some, you may be seeing full visuals. All of this is still clairvoyance. You are someone who has this clairvoyant ability. You will be strong at visualization practices, and oftentimes you will have found that you learn best visually. You may be really drawn to alchemical signs and symbols, and you have a strong imagination ability. You're able to visualize in guided meditations, or you're able to visualize how you want that highest timeline to look. If this is your strongest clair sense and you're looking to develop it, of course, deprivation of sight can be very helpful. We don't have to be extreme in this, but spending time in darkness, and you definitely see this with the upsurge in darkness retreats that people are going on, can be really helpful because it cuts off the third dimensional physical sight to then start using that third eye ability. Spending time in the energy of imagination, so daydreaming, watching movies, reading books, which really stimulate the imagination, can be very helpful to strengthen the third eye, as can, of course, third eye meditations that are out there. Utilizing divination tools such as oracle cards, pendulums are great for all of the clair senses, but oftentimes people who are clairvoyant really feel connected to utilizing visual aids. The other solar clair that we're going to look at today is that higher version of the hearing, and it often comes as a voice in the inner ear. It can be quite confusing because oftentimes that voice sounds like your own voice, but it does tend to be more inner ear based. As with all information that is being received by your clair senses, you want to ensure that you have discernment and that you're strengthening your discernment to ensure that the information that is coming in is coming from the highest loving sources. If you tune into an energy and the information doesn't feel loving, it doesn't feel expansive, then you want to disconnect from that energy. Those who of you who are clairaudient, it's your strongest clair, you will be very drawn to music, and you will really feel benefit and you'll really feel the benefits of utilizing different frequencies and sounds and binaural beats in your meditations. Remember that what you're doing is you're tuning your internal inner ear ability to pick up different frequencies that are out there in the astral plane and in the higher spiritual plane. Really focusing on honing that ability to hear, but from the internal perspective, will really help to strengthen the clairaudient ability. As this tuning in process takes place, you'll experience ringing in the ears, not constantly, but on and off, and that's that sign of that adjustment taking place. Or you may hear muffled noises, you may think that you're hearing something, but you can't quite make out what it is. All of that is very normal for someone who is working with clairaudience. The chakra connected to clairaudience is the throat chakra. The throat chakra isn't just about the voice and the ability to speak, it's also about the ability to hear, the ability to listen, and the ability to receive in that way. Any practices that you do to bring the throat chakra into balance will, of course, help this ability to regulate. Please remember that this internal guidance system is you tuning into energies that are very there and very real, but maybe can't be perceived with the physical senses. There are different qualities to the levels that you're going to be able to connect into. The closest realm to us is what's called the astral plane. And the astral plane tends to be talked about divided into three different realms: the lower astral plane, the middle astral plane, and the higher astral plane. When you're starting to tune into these extra sensory energies and these extra sensory abilities, please always ensure that you're using that discernment, that you're paying attention to how the information that you're receiving feels, and understand that connecting into the astral plane is not a bad thing, but you have to keep your senses about you. You don't have to take everything that you receive as being completely correct or completely useful. In the membership, I am going to be spending 3 whole sessions with the members going into the astral plane, what it is, how it works, what to be mindful of, discernment, all of that stuff, because there tends to be this misconception within the spiritual community that everything you're tuning into is loving and of the light and for your highest good. This is a misconception, and it also invalidates people's experiences who've connected into this energy and not had the most positive experiences. We have to remember that this astral plane exists, that you're going to make contact with it as you do expand and as you do develop, but you want to have discernment, just like you would in everyday human life. You would take information, you would let it marinate, and then you would decide whether or not it was for you. I don't ever want anyone to be scared of developing these abilities or to be scared of working in the astral plane. Please do keep in mind that not everything that you're going to come into contact with in there has your highest interests in mind. They're not all connected to complete unconditional love, and that the astral plane and your work in the astral plane is designed to specifically develop your discernment. It's a plane where discernment is absolutely necessary, and by working in that plane, you're going to strengthen that discernment. I hope that you have found this overview of the Clair sensors and your internal navigation system useful. By working with your strongest Clair and really developing that, you will find that the other Clair senses do come online. I see this all the time with people when they train with me. They start working in their own Akashic records. They receive information in line with their strongest Clair to start with. And then when they start to work with other people, so they train to become professional Akashic Records practitioners, they start to open up these other Clair senses. It's not a case of, well, my strongest Clair is Clairsentience, for example, but I want clairvoyance. I'll go off and spend all this time and energy developing my clairvoyance. If you spend the time strengthening that internal navigation system, really focusing on the development of discernment and working with the strongest Clair that you have, you will find that the other Clairs come online very naturally. They can't be forced online. It's about working with what you have, strengthening that, and allowing the others to unfold as they are meant to. I shall put the link to the membership in the show notes. It works out at less than £1.50 a day. It's a place where there's a good community. We're able to really do deep dives into topics that maybe we can't always talk about on social media, and there's a wealth of information in there. So if you do want to have some support on your spiritual development journey, your spiritual awakening journey, you want to have a place where you can go once a month and meet on live with the same people and chat through different things, and of course bring all of your questions, then please do consider signing up for the membership. You go onto the website, you pick the members only live for the month that you are joining, and then you will receive an email from myself with the passcode to the members area, and then you can go and watch everything in your own time that is already in there. I hope that you have found this episode useful, and I look forward to speaking to you all next week.